La 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 la. German Masala, sit back and listen to German Masala. Sit back and listen to German Masala.
Welcome everyone to second episode of our podcast German Masala. This is your host Herbir.
And I'm your other host, Alex.
Thank you everyone for listening to our first podcast and sending us messages, beautiful messages that encourage us a lot to keep doing this. That's why we are doing this again. We got an email from our listener, Johnny, Alex. Should I read it loud?
Yeah, please read it out loud, and then we'll see what Johnny has to say. And actually, just a small disclaimer, I guess, because Johnny is a good friend of mine. He's based in the US, and he shot us this email, but really cool. So if you want to send us an email, we have the email address you can send emails to in our show notes below. It's germanmasala@alex-universe.de.
Cool. Before I read the email, let me just tell you how this works. So we do this on bi-weekly basis, and each time one of us gets to choose the topic without the other one knowing what the topic is going to be. Last time, the topic was space exploration. Alex chose it, and Alex is also somewhat an expert on the topic.
Well, I don't know if I would call myself an expert, but yes, it's a topic I'm really passionate about, and we talked about that last episode.
Exactly. Let's say passionate about, and you know about the topic a bit more than I do. So for me, you are an expert, Alex.
Okay, I get. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool.
Cool. So what Johnny says is, he says, "Hey guys, while listening, I had the following question, and as an engaged listener, I thought that I'd reach out." Wow, thank you for doing this, Johnny. And the question is, what do you think about space winters? Since people in the 60s thought the same thing, this is the beginning of space travel, and we'll be all traveling to space soon. And then nothing really happened. Do you think there's a chance this could happen again? Oh, wow, good question. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the risk that stuff that's being kicked off now with the kind of second big space age upon us, right, could be something that is a period of time, and then after that it just dies off. However, I think there's a couple of things that are fundamentally different. Back in the 60s, when the race to space was really happening, and even after that time, there was still progress being made, right? We talked about that there weren't any people on the moon anymore, but the International Space Station got built. We had the shuttle program from NASA. So it wasn't like there was I guess you can call it a space winter, but it was not like there was nothing done during that time, right? And I think there's also the fundamental advantages that we have with technology, or advances we had in technology in the recent years, which enable us now to reuse rockets. And we talked about this last podcast, obviously, so if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to that. But SpaceX, right? It's such a big factor to have a driving force behind your project, behind your ideas. And in this case, it's Elon Musk with SpaceX, right? They are pushing this to the next level. And honestly, with all the advances they've made, and with also other companies like Boeing and the company from Virgin, right? The ones that want to also do the reusable space rockets thing, and they actually have proven that they can do this. They are all now in this big industry, and since there's a lot of money to be made in that industry, I think it's not going to happen anytime soon that we'll step back from that. And from here on out, I think we're going to be a space civilization more and more in the years to come.
Yeah, I think so too, Alex, and I hope so as well. I think reusable rockets are going to be the main factor in this, because a rocket costs a lot of money. I don't have the numbers in my head right now from top of my head. Maybe you know a little bit about that, Alex?
It's on the SpaceX website. I want to say like a SpaceX launch costs like, for low Earth orbit, maybe like 60 to 80 million, maybe 80 million or something like that, which is considerably cheaper than any other rocket company or any other launch company, because again, SpaceX has the reusable rockets.
Yeah. Cool. I hope we answered your question, Johnny. So I would say let's go to this week's topic, Alex.
Yeah, I'm super excited because, as you mentioned, we're doing this, on a rotational basis. So this week it's your honor to choose a topic, and I don't know what you're choosing. So I'm excited to hear what we'll be talking about today.
Cool. Well, let me tell you, I was actually thinking about a different topic, but then last week or the week before that, I think last week, so there were this news about US stopping the H-1B visa until the end of the year. And my Twitter feed was like filled with tweets about this. And when I went to Google News, I kept reading the news about this. And no worries, it's not going to be about H-1B visas, but it's just generally how interested people are in whatever is happening in the US. So the question I asked myself, why is that the people care so much about the US and the things happening over there? Of course, there is like a historical reason, a political reason as well, but that's not really something I want to talk to you about. It's more our experiences with the US, or what we read about the US as children, or what we know about US right now, what that makes us so much interested in what's happening over there, right? So the question is, why do we care so much about the US? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally made. That is super interesting. Man, I love this. I love this. Okay, so basically it's why are people so obsessed with the US in general, or interested? Let's put it in a positive way. Like why are people so interested in the US? That is a good question. And out of the top of my head, there's like just a billion thoughts flashing around now, but I guess we should start at why maybe we are interested in the US, because I am, and when that interest started. Because the first time I think I really got into what's happening in the US was during high school. I think it wasn't during elementary school. I think it was. I mean, obviously, you know that there's different continents and different countries, and you're being taught that, sure, like I knew that the US existed. I knew some of the historical events that happened there. But I think the first time that I really got thrown into, at least the first time that I remember of right now, is actually during the presidential elections 2 cycles back, when our, I want to say like, computer engineering no, it wasn't like informatics teacher, right? Like IT teacher. It was like we were still using floppy disks and working on Microsoft Word, stuff like that. But I think it's when we started talking about, because he was also our geography teacher, if I remember correctly, but we're talking about the US elections, and with Barack Obama running for president, the first time a black president could be elected. I think that's the first time I was actually starting to comprehend a little bit more of what's going on. And then, growing up my adult life, after I heard so much about the US, after I dug more into the companies, obviously, like I'm really interested in the big tech companies of this world, and they're all basically in the US, right? I had the basically privilege to do a study abroad year in the US. That was my first time ever being to the US. I was 15 at the time, turned 16 while I was over there. And that is when my love for the US as a country with the people, it was really positive, and I loved the time over there. And that's why I also went back every year since and visited friends and people over there. I think that's where my obsession really started to begin with. But you didn't visit the US till, I want to say, like last year or the year before or something. That was your first time in the US, right?
Yes, 2 years ago I visited US. Back then, I visited San Francisco. Yes, the Bay Area, and for work actually. I had not been to US before that, and it was a very interesting experience for me. It was a great opportunity. So I went there. I saw the country, not that much to be honest, because I was mainly there for work. And after that, I took like a couple of days off to do some traveling. But I've only seen like the Bay Area up until now, and New York. I've been 3 times now, so not seen that much. But so that's why I actually asked this question. I hadn't been to US before 2018, but I was still always very interested in whatever was happening over there. So how did this start for me actually? When I was a kid, I had a friend who I used to play cricket with. Like, we were a group of like 10 people, 10 kids playing together each day, sharing all those little things that all the kids do all over the world. So, but this one kid always stood out because he always had like the best shoes, best Nike shoes, or he will have mobile devices. I'm talking about the late 90s right now.
Yeah.
So the Indian market back then wasn't really open. So I don't know if you know about this, Alex, but Indian market used to be a quite conservative one. So they used to protect their local companies. So, and then there was in early 90s, we had a finance minister called Manmohan Singh, and he was Oxford educated. He was one of the really good economists back then in the world, and he started opening up the Indian economy. Now, many people might hate me for saying this, what I'm saying right now, because they wouldn't agree with me, as it is the case with politics and politicians usually. But I think that was the turning point. That was the turning moment when the Indian economy opened up and people started getting all the things which are American, which come from other parts of the world, in India as well. So now if iPhone launches here not just here in Germany, but let's say in the US, it also launches in India, right? But back then it was not the case. And I had this friend who used to have all these great things. And how did he get all those things? Because his father used to live in the US. So living in the US, and this was not just the case with him, living in the US in my state where I come from, Punjab, it used to be synonymous to prosperity. So if you were in the US, you were sort of rich, and no one would ask what you did over there. Just being in the US was enough. I honestly, I had a friend in the college. We did our degree together, and after the degree, he went to the US and he paid like $45,000 to go to the US, and we were like, wow, that's still a market. That's still a thing over there in Punjab where I come from. So US equals to prosperity. I think for many of the people living in the villages, it's still the case. And that's how I was interested in whatever was happening over there.
Do you think that's because of this image that the US has, at least that even I heard of, not before I went to the US, it's like, the streets are paved with gold, right? Like if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Like those songs, those sayings that people say, like the US is known for, you can go from dishwasher to a millionaire, right? And although I would argue that this is actually not the case for everyone, but there is the economic prosperity or opportunity, at least, that this could happen to you. I want to say that I don't know if the chances are lower or higher. What I do want to say is that you still, if you're a founder, if you want to found a company, the US is still spending. I was actually just recently listening to a podcast. You know Frank Thelen? Frank Thelen?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. He's a. If you don't know him, look him up. He's a German investor, and he was on a different podcast. It was super interesting. He talked about how he dropped out of college or something, and he wasn't really, well, whatever. But he talked about that the US is just investing capital so big there, right? If you have an idea, let's say in Germany, you pitch that idea, and if you get anything, you might get like 10K or something, like 10,000 euros. But then you go over to the US and the same idea, just because someone believes in, hey, this could be something, and they're more risk taking, gives you like 100,000 euros or maybe the equivalent of like $500,000 or something if your idea is great, right? It's just easier to get started there in some circumstances. But I think the overall obsession is also because the US is one of the, and that's just economical facts, right? The biggest world economy there is currently. It has the most money to spend, let's put it in that way, right? Because it's the biggest economy. It exports a lot of goods, it imports a lot of goods, it's an important trading partner, it's a huge country just from a size perspective. It has a lot of people living in that country, obviously not as much as India for that matter, but it still has a lot of people in that country. And this country is one of the newest countries there is in this world, right? It was founded, it was founded after some of the instruments I can see here in Germany in like a museum. Like I've seen a violin that's older than the US as a country, right? Which is crazy. But it's this, I want to say it's this sense of the US is just big, important, powerful. It has a huge army, a huge, military force also, which makes it a major player on the grounds of the US, of the world, whether it be economical or societal. What's happening in the US is sweeping the world. If it's a country or song, not a country song maybe, but if it's music in general, if it's movies, what's happening there is kind of like it's being taken as the ideal living standard, this Western world civilization culture. And what's happening there is often regarded as something that's desirable and that you want to have over here. But speaking about this now, why is this? Why are people so upset, even with movies, right?
I think it's the concept of American dream, right? As you just mentioned, you said that you had this notion of that the roads are paved with gold, that everything over there is really nice and exciting. I always had this feeling in India, but I never knew that people had the same feeling in Germany as well. But Germany being also one of the most advanced countries in the world, but people still think, or used to think, of the US that way. I mean, yeah, that's one of the main reasons. So something very interesting I actually came across when I was in the university. So I studied software development along with some components of business as well. It's called business informatics. And at the university, we had this course which was basically to teach students about what's happening in the society, about the soft topics. They basically called it, my lecturer called it a course to help people not just become Fachidioten, which would translate to, I think, a nerd, right?
Well, no. I want to say Fachidioten is something where you're specifically knowledgeable about one certain topic, which might be considered nerdy at times, but it would be you would be super knowledgeable about that one topic, but you wouldn't be knowledgeable about anything else. So it could be also you're a nerdy person with regards to societal and cultural things. But I want to say, because you studied something that's computer related, it was probably relating to you don't just want to be a software developer or something like that. You want to also be a sociable person that is able to that at least knows about what's going on in the world to some degree, right?
Yeah, exactly. Over here, shout out to German language, which is so powerful that we have words for so many things we don't have words for in other languages. Very interesting. This might be a topic for one of our next podcasts.
Oh, definitely.
Anyway, so this lecturer, I remember there were 3 or 4 different topics, and I got the topic of how American movies and series help to export the US, its culture, to other parts of the world. I remember as a teenager, I used to watch Friends, and Friends was, it still is. I mean, it's one of my all-time favorite shows. I love the show. Even when I'm working, sometimes it'll just keep running in the background, and the dialogues will make me happy and will make me focus more on my work. So, even if I had never been to the US, but through these shows like Friends, or I also used to watch Scrubs a lot, I became fan of the US, and I used to think how the life is going to be there. And of course, you only see nice things in these shows, right? Which makes you love the country even more.
Yes, and that's probably also, now that I had a couple of minutes to reflect on this, I talked about movies, and obviously, as a kid, at some point, you start watching those American movies, right? For example, Transformers. I remember, it's a car movie, it's action movie, and it's all or most of it is taking place in the US, right? It's all these concepts of power, freedom, all of that, which still resonate to this day. But maybe the world is also obsessed with the US due to just the news it's generating, right? Yes. The US is a controversial, or has, or is, I don't want to say anything wrong here, but there are definitely topics which are controversial, and also topics which have been controversial are still ongoing. The Civil War, right? Slavery, all of these things. It's not unique to the US, right? Slavery didn't originate in the US as far as I know. Honestly, I don't know where it originated. I don't want to say anything wrong. Maybe in the times of like Egypt building pyramids or something. But you know, so it's nothing new, but these topics were so big. They created such a huge impact on also the life in other countries that maybe due to some of the, I want to say, more negative connotated events, people started looking at the US more, right? People were like, oh, what's going on over there? And because it is I don't want to say like never ending stream of topics that's coming from there, but it kind of is, whether it relates to, let's say, wars going on around the world, like in the Middle East, for example, right? The US has been or still is a major player over there. It just creates a never-ending stream of things. And I think humans in general, like the human species, is just interested in talking about stuff, and everyone has an opinion usually. And obviously that's what we're doing here. This is our podcast, right? That's what we're talking about. But because some of these topics might have been more controversial than others going on in the world, and as the world becomes more and more connected and news travel the globe faster, I think it just piles on even more, right? Back in the days, if you want to, send a message over from the like American continent over to Europe, you would put this on a ship or something, right? But then now it's instant. And whenever something happens, you get drawn into this. And because of this rich history, I don't know, like it just feels to me that the US is so often in the news because of the content, what is going on in the country, right?
Exactly. So thinking from a historical point of view, although, I mean, none of us is like, both of us are not historians. But,
not at all.
Whatever,
not at all.
Not at all. But, thinking about how after the Second World War, let's talk about First and Second World War first and then afterwards. I mean, First and Second World War, US played a huge role, right? And then after the Second World War, in order to, be a powerful force against the East Bloc, US invested a lot of money in Europe. I mean, we all know about the Marshall Plan. We have heard how US helped out in Germany to also the thing about this Luftbrücke in Berlin.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called in English, right? But it's basically, so Berlin was under the Soviet Union from all four sides, and to provide Berlin with essential necessities of everyday, like food, etc. They provided these things with the planes, like they would fly things over, and doing all those things meant for the US that they were increasing their power on one hand, and the second thing was also that their reputation, that their image was getting more and more better in the eyes of the world daily, right? And then after the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, of course, the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Bloc lost like most all of its power. And then, that was, again, I think the point when the US gained more power in the world, right? I think you're very young, Alex. I don't know if you have heard the stories about like East and West Bloc and how the US really had impact on these things, but maybe your family told you some things about this.
Oh yeah, definitely. Some of that. Obviously, I talked to my parents, maybe not to the extent that I'm fully knowledgeable, and maybe that's a shortcoming of mine, which I should, work on in the future. But they've taught me stories of visiting friends in Berlin during the time of the Berlin Wall, where they, had to cross over, and it was a difficult time, right? It was from a now historical perspective, interesting time also, but it was a difficult time for a lot of people. And you're right, it probably shaped the image of the American, I don't want to say society, but just as America as like a helper, right? Someone who's doing something in the world. And maybe that's also because obviously just in general, right, psychology wise, humans usually don't like change, right? We like if things are going the way, and if you're change, you're being disruptive. And a lot of people, I want to say, especially in Germany, I feel like change is always something that's like, oh, change, oh no, like
it's quite a conservative society.
Yes, I would say that. But I think change is important, right? But whenever something changes, obviously it's being fought. And if you're, I think someone, I don't know who, maybe Steve Jobs or someone else, but said like, if you're receiving negative press and backlash about what you're doing, you're probably doing something right? Because obviously not if you're, I don't know, if you're just getting negative press, but if someone is saying, oh, what are they doing? Like if you're founding a new company and it's like, what are they doing? Tesla, my favorite example, right? I have to bring this one up. Everyone was like bashing on Tesla. Obviously they had a huge supporting community as well, but you know, people were making fun of them. Their little golf carts were just zipping around the streets, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward like 2 decades, not even, and they're the world's most valuable automaker, period. There is no one more valuable, right? They crossed that threshold. I think that's where change comes in. And for the US, I think a lot of the news, because you started this all saying by, look at this, my news feed is full of the H-1B visa thing. Mine had at least some parts of it were filled with the US or President Trump saying that he would reallocate some troops from Germany and take them out of Germany, put them maybe into Poland, put them back into the US, right? These are all things where this is change. And without saying this is negative or positive, it is changing something about the way it used to be, right? And this is just generating a lot of press. So I wouldn't say that the US is more important or less important than other countries in this world, but just because it has such a huge influence or had such a huge influence in so many aspects of our world society, right? Whether it be in military force, and a lot of it is obviously related to that, back to the world wars, back to some of the wars that are still going on, or some of the conflicts, right? But then also societal issues like gun law, something like that, right? It's just because we don't have that, and it's different from what we have, that we often look to countries like that and be like, what are they doing over there? And it just proves as a source of not conflict, but as a source of change from our perspective of things, and then it gets picked up in the news, and it's interesting.
Yeah, but again, doesn't it come back to the whole like exporting your culture with the help of movies and with TV, and nowadays everything is available on the US? Doesn't it come back to all of that? I mean, I know I watch Trevor Noah, like Tonight Show, on almost on daily basis.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Of course, he gets questions from people. I don't know if you read the comments under his video. Sometimes people go like, "Oh, you are South African. Why do you care about what's happening in the US?" Although he's living in the US now and presents a US show. Anyways, people are going to talk about these things, whatever. But, these are sort of the main sources of information right now. That we have. We get so much information via YouTube, and all the, there are so many channels talking about these things, so many comedians doing their shows about what's happening in the US, about Trump, most of them negative. I mean, there's also usually a reason for that.
Well,
but
to be fair, this is the world that we see on YouTube. And if you dive into some of the other world that's also on YouTube, but also on other media, you will find a bunch of positive or supporting content for what's happening, which is, I think, terrible. I think what's happening right now, and also some of the presidential actions have been controversial to say the least, and completely outrageous and stupid to say the most, right? But
not really presidential.
Huh? Sorry?
Not really presidential, right?
Yeah, not really presidential. I'll put it that way. But again, putting this into perspective, there is this divided world, or at least some part divided. What really caught my eye, though, is you said doesn't it all relate back to kind of the music, the movies, the export of culture?
Yeah.
And I don't know, because I can't really judge this. Obviously, I'm not at that age that I could judge this at all. But was there this obsession with what's happening in the US before this big export of culture using movies and using music, cinema, stuff like that was happening? Or did it start with the age of more entertainment focused work being shared and creating this image? Because let's be completely honest, the US is known as the free country where you have, all your freedom and stuff like that. But going back, looking at this as a German citizen now, you can't even cuss on like American TV. All of your like songs that are being played on the radio are, most of them, you can't even have explicit words in them, right? When Eminem, like the rapper, right? Eminem, when he visited like like Stefan Raab's show, I think it was, like one of the German TV shows, and he was like, "What? You can say like bad words. I want to keep this PG, so I don't want to blurt out these words now." But he said, "What? You can say these cuss words on TV?" And the host was like, "Yeah, that's free speech, right? That's what you can say here." And he basically lost his mind, and he went like, "Oh," and he blurted out all these cuss words, which obviously was funny at the time, but it got me thinking. And also when I was in the US, like, people have this image of complete freedom, but is it really though, right? Is this more freedom than other countries would provide you with?
So I read this statistic like a couple of weeks ago. 1% of the total US population is incarcerated right now. So 1% of the people are in jails. I mean, that is, and when you compare it to different other countries, it's so much more than any other country in the world, So, I mean, talking about freedom, of course, that's a different system. Who are we to judge their system, But still, it doesn't sound very free to me. And again, coming back to a free speech issue, I mean, I've heard people talking on movies or on shows about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, right? But again, if you can't say things in public TV, then maybe, and you can say those in Germany, so maybe the freedom of speech over here is stronger than over there, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's something where I would like to point out that it doesn't necessarily add to content being streamed or being shown on TV if you have cuss words in it. But it's just one of a couple of small things which all add up to something which I wouldn't I think I love I love the US. I spend a lot of time over there. Currently, I wouldn't go over there because of the honestly, currently I think the handling of the whole COVID and pandemic situation is terrible. They just had their sad record of the most new daily infections recorded since the beginning of this, which is terrible, where all other countries, or most other countries, have managed to go down the curve. They, for some reason, have managed to go up the curve, which is terrible, I think. So that's why I currently wouldn't visit there. But still, I love the US. I love the people, the openness, the I don't know, the landscape, the opportunity that's being created for people who want to create something in this world. And that's why you see all the big companies in this world being basically from America or China, right? Because obviously China, different story, but that's where economic freedom comes in, and maybe that's where I have like a tiny small side venture going, like a tiny small startup, and it's hard to found something in Germany. It's hard. You have to work with like tax stuff. You have to get everything set up. You have to fill out forms. You have to then make sure that all the stuff is working. It is a hurdle, a major hurdle. And I've never founded a company in the US, but from what I've heard is it's much easier to not only get funding there, but also to get started. So that's a different kind of freedom then, which again is probably a little bit more free than in, for example, Germany here, because I can relate to this. But yeah, I mean
I get it, Alex, and I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love the country as well. I love US. I mean, that's why we are talking about US right now. But I think that's also why we sort of have the right to criticize it as well when something is going wrong. I mean, people, some of the, again, not the people in our YouTube feed, but in, the other, it is very polarizing. The whole society has been, polarized by the social media. It's a fact, although it's a good tool. I mean, a hammer is a good tool, but you can also use to bash someone's head in. You can do bad things with it. So social media has been used to polarize the society. But what was I talking about? Yeah, the other people, they would say, why are you talking or bad about the US, or why are you criticizing the US? I mean, if we love the country, if we go there, a lot of us work for American companies because some of the great American companies, especially in tech, are present everywhere in the world, and I think that also gives us the right to criticize it a bit if something wrong is happening over there.
We're invested, right? We're not to put this completely as a disclaimer here. We both don't hold any right to vote in the US. We don't this is like we're not we're not invested in that way. But I think, yes, we still are invested in a bunch of other ways, whether it be through work, whether it be through just personal love for something. If you love something, I think you can be upset if something happens to that which you don't agree with or something. But, going back to this overall obsession now, I still struggle, honestly, I still struggle to identify exactly why I as a person, I'm so obsessed with the US. Is it just because of the people that just I like over there? Or is it because there is so much controversy going on where it's something like, right, something bad is happening, but you can't look away? Like, is it because there is so much controversial stuff happening that you're just drawn into this bubble? But it's so interesting because, for example, India, right? You are from India originally, living in Germany now, but you're from India. I know so little about India, but it's a country that has way more citizens than the US, than Germany, than a lot of other countries combined. Why do I not know anything about India, or just really little about India? But why do I know so much about the US? Is it because I went there? But then again, why did I want to go to the US? Right? Why? Because I had this image of it. I wanted to improve my English as well. But yeah, dang.
Yeah. I guess it's because things that are happening over there are so exciting, right? So, I mean, someone like Donald Trump, he has a very colorful personality. I think someone like him would never be a chancellor here in Germany, right? I don't think so. At least it's my feeling,
Oh, sorry, I just bumped my mic. Never say never, but I agree. At least as I see it right now, chances would be very slim. And actually, I'm thankful for that.
Me too. But anyways, coming back to things being exciting, right? So he is the president over there, and you hear him saying things, again, as I said, which are not really presidential. These are interesting things. These are funny at times, and that's why you want to listen to what he's saying, what's happening over there. And then, I was listening to this Senate hearing of Mark Zuckerberg in over there. They actually invite these people, grill them with questions. I've never seen this happening in India. I was always interested in politics when I was in India as well. I'm still interested in Indian politics. But I never saw a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company sitting over there and politicians asking him questions or her questions. I mean, I know that those were not really very insightful questions, of course. I mean, these were mostly old people, right? Asking questions.
We don't want to be disrespectful, right?
No,
people
exactly.
of age, yes.
People of age.
But but I completely agree. It was pretty funny at times.
Yeah, but I think these are the things that make US so much exciting and so interesting for people like us, right?
It's true. It's true. And to be completely fair, this is talking from a perspective of us, like relatively young people who are interested in tech, who work in a environment which is vastly shaped by the actions which are being taken by the US to some degree or not. And then also personally, right, I have friends there. That's why I'm invested in that even more than maybe some other people. And I would argue that some of the elderly of even like Germany would not be so obsessed with US things. However, talk about like the news, right? We here in Germany have the Tagesschau. It's the daily show. It's literally, it translates to daily show every day at 8 o'clock p.m. on the like second. It starts, it lasts for 15 minutes. It has all the news, and it's honestly, from a lot of different media sources, I would say this is one of the most unbiased media sources I know. It reports on everything that's going on. And it usually, even when I'm outraged by some of the comments, usually from US or also sometimes from Germany, I don't want to take us out of the equation. There's stuff that's happening in Germany which isn't great, right? I'm sometimes outraged by this. I'm like, oh, this is stupid. How can someone say this? It's still, they are reporting on this fairly neutral, which I think is awesome. But, you know, this daily show, in the past month, I would say, I don't know, I've started listening to this or watching it daily, so I guess I have a good overview, but I would say, dang, like, seriously, like 80% or more of the shows had some sort of US news in there, whether it be something about the police brutality which has happened, whether it be about the protests that have been going on for Black Lives Matter, whether it has been presidential statements being made with regards to the coronavirus, whether it be, you know, I think that's mostly it, what was happening over the past month. But, you know, obviously the space launch, you know, SpaceX launching the astronauts. And this is where the excitement comes in. But, you know, I think even if you try to not be interested in the US, you are basically forced to, because this is, I would say, one of the biggest news things in Germany. Yeah. And it's talking about this because it's affecting the world we live in.
Yeah, exactly. I cannot agree more. I think it's, again, coming back to the media we consume, right? It's one of the main factors in making US so interesting for us.
And probably...
Anyways, yeah, sorry, Alex.
Go ahead.
No, I was just trying to come back to some of the lighter topics because, you know, I was traveling to go to the US this year, and I was thinking about taking like a month off and doing a road trip. I mean, my initial plan was to do a road trip from New York to LA, but then I read about it that it's not really possible it is possible in a month's time, but you won't be able to see much. So you should take like some more time if you really want to see a lot of things.
I would argue a month is enough time.
You think so?
Yeah, honestly, like I would say, like, if you cannonball it, like the fastest way to go, like from New York to LA or something, or San Francisco, I want to say is like 3 days or something, or 2 days if you continuously drive. But yes, you want to do see some stuff, but 4 weeks, like a month, yeah, I would say that's enough.
Okay.
I don't know. Cool, maybe you listeners of ours, if you listen to this on YouTube, leave a comment, or if you listen to the show on some other medium, just shoot us an email. Let us know if you're in the US. Do you think 4 weeks or like a month is enough to do a coast to coast road trip?
Road trip and actually seeing things over there.
Seeing things. Yes. Yes. Well, the thing is though, what exactly do you want to see? Right? Like,
so the thing is, I don't want to drive like 8 hours daily and really just be on the highway. So for example, if I start in New York, I want to see New York for like 4 days, and then if I go to Washington DC, I want to be there for a couple of days. And see that's your first
city, but that's not the right way. Like you would be driving just down the coast, and you wouldn't really be driving anywhere west for that weather. But yeah.
Okay, tell me about it, Alex. You have traveled a lot. I know you like going to South Carolina, is it?
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yes, yeah. I love it there.
Tell me about your experiences, please.
Well, the first one is obviously the first experience I ever had was me being an exchange student flying over from Germany. My first stop was New York. So the first ever US experience was New York, which was crazy. I mean, I was 15 years old at the time. I was, I could speak English, right? But it was a huge strain. Even the first maybe 3 months in high school, I had the luck to have some really great friends there. And I will tell you about this in a second. But I would ask constantly, like we were sitting over lunch in the high school cafeteria, and I would ask like, what does this mean? Like, I don't understand. And the first couple of weeks and months, I was constantly translating back and forth between German and English. I don't know if it's the same for you with like maybe, I don't know, German or your native language.
Not anymore. It used to be like in the first couple of months, and then when I was there, and then I have to tell this. I had a really great German teacher who told me, stop translating things from English to German, otherwise you will never learn German. And that was the best piece of advice I ever got.
Do you still, when you listen to English, do you translate it back to your native language, or?
No, I don't.
No?
I do not anymore. I think I used to do that, but not anymore.
Okay.
I think if you keep doing that, it'll never come naturally to you. So you would never know what to say next, because you will take some time to translate in your head right before you say anything. Again, movies, serials, TV has helped me a lot to learn English.
Yes, it keeps my English sharp. At least I like to say that to myself, so that I have an excuse to watch Netflix and other shows. But yeah, so the first days were hard because it's the first time ever I was thrown into a situation where if I wanted to speak in my native language in German, I couldn't. Like, even if I would, like, nobody would understand me, or at least most people wouldn't. So it was interesting. The first couple of days, we were still all together as an exchange student group. I had a couple of people from Germany there, so we're all together in New York. It was interesting. It was fun. And then I flew over to North Carolina because that's where my host family was. If you're listening to this, Christine, I have to send her this podcast. I definitely have to. If you're listening to this, Christine, thank you so much for having me. You made my whole obsession with the U.S. My first impression of the U.S. awesome, and also it was one of the most shapening whatever. I can't think of the right word right now, but it was one
shaped your life. It shaped
yes, it shaped my life this time. So thank you, Christine, for Christine was my host mom, for those of you who don't know. Thank you for enabling me to have this great time over there. Anyway, I flew over there. I got onto this tiny airplane in New York, and I've never been on an airplane that had 3 seats in one row. It was like 1 on one side and 2 on the other side. It was crazy. Wow. So we flew over there. I landed in Wilmington, North Carolina, in this tiny airport. It's an international airport, but it's tiny. They opened the door. There wasn't even a gangway out. You just stepped out of the plane and then you walked into the building. And this wall of hot, humid air hit me. It was something like I've never experienced this before in my life. I went out. It was hot. You went into the building. It was freezing cold because everyone had AC, had a like air conditioner in there. And that was my first like entrance into like my new world, which would, not haunt me, but which would be a big part of my life ever since. I obviously met my host mom at the airport. I met my host brother at the time. Luke, also shout out to you if you're listening to this. You've been, or you still are, fun to hang out with, and we would play video games together, stuff like that. And then obviously high school, the entire experience. I think most of it, like the most determining part of it, was shaped by friendship, actually. And I was so lucky that in actually a history class, we talked a lot about US history. In my history class during my first, which was in the first half of my study abroad year there, a girl came up to me, Kaylee, and after like the first couple of days, I was just, I didn't know anyone. So the teacher would obviously say like, oh, this is Alex. He's from Germany. I'm like, all right, cool. But I would know no one. So I would sit at lunch, I'd be like, oh, this is awkward. I bought like my lunch. I didn't know what to buy. So I just ended up with some random food. I was like, oh, is this okay? Like, oh, I don't know. But then at some point, Kaylee just, for whatever reason, out of an act of human kindness, I don't know, I'm forever grateful for that. She was like, so do you just want to sit down and have lunch with us? And honestly, that was the the turning point. Like that was the determining moment in my like life, basically from that point on, because through her I got to know friends that I have to this moment that I value, that are some of my best friends I could ever wish for. And it started, like, all of it started falling together. One of my friends, or two of my friends, were actually, they had boats. We would go out and wakeboard, and you know, life just changed after that point because I had people to talk to, people to enjoy the time with. So that moment was really defining, and it was fun. And actually, one quick story here, and then I'm gonna stop talking. But one of my first days, my host mom and we would look at the bus schedule, because obviously in the US, right, you have school buses, and that's what it, you know. All right, so we had a school bus, and we would look at the school bus schedule, and one school bus, like the area I lived in the US, was a big area, and I didn't know this, but there were multiple school buses going to that area. So the first day I looked at the bus, whichever I had to go on, and all right, I saw a bus that had my neighborhood on there. I was like, all right, I guess this is it. So I went on that bus the first day, and it was the wrong bus. Like it was the right neighborhood, so I was in the right area, but yeah. I just, like, at some point I was like, I think this is where I have to get off. Can you leave me out here? To the bus driver, and he let me out, or she. I want to say it's a he. My later bus driver was a woman. She was great, Wendy. So he let me out there, and it wasn't that I didn't know where to go after that, which was funny enough. But the thing which happened next is, the first day this happened to me, I was walking down the street, and I was kind of lost. It was, I think, the 31st of July. I was talking on the phone because it was my brother's birthday, I want to say. And I was talking on the phone, so I wasn't really worried, but I was walking down a street with no sidewalk, because that's how it is in the US and small towns sometimes. And a car, get this, a car stops beside me. And it's like, aren't you Alex? And it was a guy from my, like, pre-cal, like, it's math, right? Pre-calculus, pre-cal class. And he was like, you look lost. Do you want to, like, should I give you a ride? And you know how parents always tell you don't get into strangers' cars? I got into his car. I was so happy. He talked to my host mom, dropped me off at home. And, you know, these are the things that shape my view of the United States, of who's living there, right? Like, kindness, openness, people who are welcoming. And this is why I also got so obsessed with the US, and why I'm always so sad when something happens that squashes that view I have of it, right? It's the change, right? But if even back in Germany, people talk about, oh, the US, everybody goes to high school there, it's so easy, it's stupid. No. Like, people don't get that you get to choose your own topics, and you can make it super hard for you. A lot of people don't. That's a different story. But it's not like, you know, it's super easy. So anyway, that's one of my first experiences. And
these are, Alex, these are such wonderful stories, like both of these that you told me. And I mean, little acts of kindness, right? When someone says hello to you, or asks you to join them for lunch, you know, or gives you a lift. These kind of things, these mean, like, for the person doing these things, they mean nothing sometimes. But for the other person, as you were saying, it can be like life-changing things. You know, it made you fall in love with the US. It still, you know, as you were saying, it shaped your life, you know, and your sort of love for the country comes from these acts of kindness. So people, be kind to each other, be helpful to each other. It was a great topic, Alex. I think it was great talking to you about it. And I think we can finish now on this positive note.
All right. Happy to do that. Thank you so much, Rabia, for bringing this topic. We veered off a little bit towards the end, but yes, it is still a country that I love, but some work to be done also.
Yes, I love US as well. And hopefully I will get to do my road trip from New York to LA soon.
Yes, and hopefully I will get to see all of my friends again also soon, but we'll see.
Cool. Everyone, we are available on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, right?
Yes.
On Google Podcast. We are not there yet, but we are trying to get there as soon as possible. and we have a YouTube channel called German Masala. Please feel free to follow us over there. Hopefully you enjoy our podcast. We will keep making those for you.
Yes. Well,
cool.
Perfect. Thanks.
Till next time.
Yeah. German Masala is a podcast under the Alex Universe name. Alex Universe is currently one YouTube channel hosted by me, Alex, where I talk about electromobility, electric cars, electric bikes, all of that good stuff, and this podcast hosted by Harbier and myself.